There have long been rumours about Keir Starmer's private life, and they certainly aren't to do with any kind of doubts over his sexuality, if I can put it delicately. Okay. They are to do with his past and what the shape of his family really looks like. And it wouldn't be fair to go any further than that, but this is an open secret at Westminster that those question marks have been around for a long time, and papers have been extraordinarily restrained in not publishing any of that speculation. And even whether they've got, maybe there are publications that have more information than I'm aware of, they've been restrained. Why? Because there's been a strong feeling that it's not in the public interest.
Keir Starmer's European tour was supposed to be his triumphant debut on the world stage, the moment when he could establish himself as a true leader. Instead, it turned into a series of humiliating moments and awkward situations that cast him in the light of an inexperienced political novice. His attempts to look like an experienced statesman turned into a complete failure, from being ignored by Donald Trump to being excluded from participating in significant events, which was a real blow to his ambitions. He experienced a real shock when he returned home and faced harsh criticism from the media, which mercilessly exposed his unpreparedness and weaknesses. It wasn't just a disappointment, it was a blow to his reputation and dreams of a great future. Keir Starmer embarked on his European tour with great ambitions, full of hope and confidence, presenting himself as a statesman ready to restore Britain's international relations and strengthen his position as the future Prime Minister. His itinerary has been carefully planned to showcase his diplomatic skills, with high-level meetings and events planned across the continent. But unfortunately, Starmer's dreams of international recognition quickly collapsed, leaving him in a state of confusion and despair.
Just getting back to this defence budget, Starmer knew he wasn't going to put that up. I don't care what anyone says. He will have predicted, he'll have enough experts whispering in his ear saying this is the situation. He more than implied that, the defence departments were going to get a fair share of money. They were going to be up in the ante. There was going to be new investment with them, bearing in mind the decline they've been in for the last 12 years or so, and it ain't going to happen. And you know what? He knew it wasn't going to happen. That almost verges on lies.
The first major setback for Keir Starmer was that he was not allowed to attend the opening ceremony of Notre Dame Cathedral. This was not just a minor misunderstanding, it was a loud signal that Starmer does not have the influence that he gave himself on the world stage. While he remained in the shadows, other political leaders occupied central positions, and cracks began to appear in his carefully constructed image, threatening to destroy everything he had worked so hard to create. The consequences of this neglect proved disastrous. Political analysts were quick to emphasize that Starmer's exclusion from such a significant event eloquently testifies to his weak authority in international circles. One of the commentators bitterly remarked that if Starmer could not even receive an invitation to the opening of the cathedral, then how could he hope to successfully conclude complex international agreements in the role of Prime Minister?
Last night, time and time again, Rishi Sunak was clobbering you over the head with that £2,000 tax line. It took you almost half an hour to call it garbage. What on earth took you so long?
What matters is the facts. None of our plans involve tax rises for working people, and I'll spell it out. No income tax rises, no national insurance, no VAT. But what emerged from last night, and this is a very important takeaway, is that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, with his back against the wall, desperately trying to defend their record in office, resorted to lies, and he knows he was lying. And I don't say that lightly. Lying about our plans, lying about waiting lists, and lying about votes. And therefore the choice at the election is even clearer now, which is to turn our back, turn a page on the lies, the division and the chaos of the last 14 years and rebuild the country with Labour.
As the tour progressed, Keir Starmer's attempts to maintain his image only highlighted his vulnerability. His public statements about international cooperation and global challenges sounded unconvincing and even pathetic, especially against the background of his apparent struggle to reach meaningful diplomatic agreements. But the real culmination of his European catastrophe was just waiting in the wings. His meeting, or rather the complete absence of one, with Donald Trump in the United States turned into a real disgrace. Despite the fact that Starmer's team hyped this meeting as a chance to restore a special relationship, Trump hardly noticed his presence. Neil Gardner, a former advisor, sharply characterized Starmer's actions in Washington, calling him weak and incompetent. This harsh assessment seemed to reflect the prevailing opinion, and it sounded like a verdict. Starmer was unable to make any meaningful impact on the international stage, and as he boarded the plane back to the UK, it became apparent how massive his failure in Europe had been. What was supposed to be a triumphant tour instead raised deep doubts about his ability to represent Britain's interests on the world stage.
And we've seen billions upon billions upon billions of pounds of our taxes given away on overseas climate aid, and that was confirmed by Ed Miliband in the middle of July, that they are going to give £11.6 billion of our taxes to countries like Malaysia, who has a sovereign wealth fund worth $24 billion, whilst at the same time allowing our most vulnerable pensioners potentially to freeze to death in winter. It is despicable.
What do you think you should have done, Daniel, about the riots, if not take a firm hand? I mean, you've got societal tensions building here. He had to send a message, and a firm one, quickly.
Well, he did, Ali, and I know all about riots because in August 2011, with the London riots, I was on the front line as a police officer with a shield and a baton protecting Londoners and protecting Londoners' homes and businesses. But his response was incendiary, inflammatory, divisive, authoritarian, and plain wrong. He should be uniting the country, not dividing us.
When Keir Starmer's credibility began to crack at the seams, he faced an even more serious threat: the hostile British media, ready to tear him apart for every slightest mistake. If he thought the meeting with Trump was unpleasant, then he was in for a real shocking awakening. The British media, known for their ruthless approach to politicians, sharpened their knives in preparation for an attack during his European tour. He was a man who dreamed of holding a second referendum, wasn't he? He was the Minister for Brexit, the Shadow Minister for Brexit, and did not report to Jeremy Corbyn. Now they were ready to pounce on his every mistake and inconsistency, like predators on their prey. Starmer is completely unprepared for this challenge. He struggled to formulate coherent answers to even the simplest questions about politics, and his uncertainty was evident. When he was questioned about the reduction of winter fuel discounts, he made a critical mistake that would haunt him for the next few days. He confessed that he had never experienced difficulties paying for utilities, and this admission, like a knife in his heart, immediately alienated listeners who were struggling with the terrible cost of living crisis.
Sir Keir Starmer, Your Majesty.
Your Majesty. You must be utterly exhausted and nearly on your knees. Not much. Quite a grueling by the sound of it. Anyway, you're here. Yes. It's a very sort of quick changeover as well. I know, to say the least. And having to get to grips with everything straight away must be quite exhausting.
During the interview, Keir Starmer's attempts to change the subject turned into a complete failure. The Labour leader found himself in a desperate situation, desperately trying to regain control of the conversation, but his efforts looked pathetic and hopeless. When excerpts from the interview began to spread rapidly on social media, the public reaction was lightning fast and merciless. Users ridiculed his inability to give coherent answers. Many called the interview extremely awkward and even comical. Political commentators also did not stand aside, emphasizing that Starmer's communication style lacks clarity and effectiveness, which further undermines confidence in his leadership. It was becoming obvious the extent of the political damage caused by the media scandal caused by Starmer. In just a matter of moments, he transformed from a promising statesman into a leader who tried his best to defend his policies and connect with voters, but instead looked confused and insecure. The consequences for his leadership and the Labour Party proved disastrous, leaving his dreams of greatness in ruins.
All those sleaze scandals were really just to do with cabinet ministers having affairs, having mistresses. Right. That doesn't wash anymore in modern day Britain. People actually don't care. You know, if one of our cabinet ministers has got a relationship with someone else, who cares?
Except if it has some bearing on legislation, if it has some bearing on the conduct of policy or laws that are being made. I mean, that's when it starts to become a problem, isn't it?
So you have to have a strong public interest defence to publish this stuff. And I think to date, the media has felt that there hasn't been a strong public interest defence. And fairness to Sir Keir Starmer, whatever may or may not be going on in his past or in his private life, he has never posed with his family or children.
After his disastrous performance in the media, one disturbing question increasingly arose: will Keir Starmer be able to recover from his self-inflicted wound, or has he already predetermined his political fate? His European tour and subsequent media appearances dealt a devastating blow to his credibility. What was supposed to be a vivid demonstration of his statesmanship turned into a series of humiliating remarks and awkward confrontations, leaving him in a state of confusion. Starmer's suspension from attending the opening of Notre Dame Cathedral and his failure to meet with Donald Trump undermined his international credibility as if he had lost his last foothold. But the real damage was done when he returned home. Faced with a barrage of difficult questions from BBC radio presenters, Starmer was unable to cope with the situation, and his insecurity became apparent. His inability to articulate policies clearly or convey their concerns to voters looked like a cry for help. The public reaction was swift and merciless, and social media was filled with ridicule and harsh criticism, as if he had become a target for everyone.
It is obvious to me, and I think obvious to anybody looking in, that so far as the far right is concerned, this is coordinated, this is deliberate, this is not a protest that has got out of hand. It is a group of individuals who are absolutely bent on violence. And that's why it's important, I think, to pull together the senior police and law enforcement leaders, as we did today, to ensure that that is met with the most robust response in the coming days and weeks.
The crucial question now facing British politics is, will Starmer be able to recover from this disaster, or has his leadership already become hopeless? The challenges facing him are enormous and daunting. He needs to restore public trust, present a convincing alternative to the current government, and somehow overcome his image as a weak and disconnected leader. The future of the Labour Party and the British opposition hangs in the balance like a fragile glass ball. If Starmer cannot change the situation quickly, the party may have to look for a new leader, and this will be a real tragedy. In these turbulent times, a strong and effective opposition is more important than ever for the health of British democracy, and all eyes are on him, waiting to see if he can rise from the ruins. Share your thoughts in the comments. See you later.